Morning everybody, thanks for joining me today. So as you can see, today it is a wet, dreary day, so I figured what better day than to go set up and sit in my photo blind on the edge of a field. So I've got my camera, I got all rain gear, got my blind, so it's just a matter of going, setting up, sitting, and seeing what we can find. I've made it to my spot, or roundabouts where my spot's going to be. I'm at the edge of a field, and there's obviously some dense forest behind me, but there's a large open field in front of me with a lot of blooming yellow mullein in the field, which even though it's invasive, it still creates a beautiful atmosphere, kind of a perfect perch for different birds. So I'm going to set up kind of around the point of the forest here that juts out into the field a little bit. So I'm going to go set up quick before it starts pouring again, and then I'll explain a little bit more about why I'm setting up where I'm setting up. Okay, so let's get set up. All set up in the blind. The rain has stopped now, of course, but that means that I'm all set up and the rain stopped, so hopefully there'll be some activity now that the rain has stopped. Some birds will come out, maybe start foraging. I actually saw a pair of deer on the road as I was coming to this location, and I got two different great pictures of them as they were crossing the road, all the steam coming off the road and the rain pouring down. It's a really nice shot, I think. So I'm all set up, so I've got my 600mm on the tripod, got my camera all set up and out one of the front windows, and I also have my stool so I'm a little bit more comfortable, and obviously all the gear that comes with it. First, I apologize if I keep fogging up. It's very humid out and my lens keeps getting fogged up. I keep trying to wipe it off to keep it clean, but we'll see how this goes here. So I picked this specific location for a couple of reasons. So I'm right on the edge of a field and a forest, and I've seen quite a few deer, I've seen bear, that use a trail that kind of cuts across this field and actually ends up going into the forest behind me. There's kind of a jut out, a point of the forest that comes out into the field, and that's kind of where I'm set up out in that section there. So the wildlife that I've seen recently, and also past couple of years, they come from the forest across the way, come across the field, forage in the field a little bit, and then shoot over into the forest back towards my right a little bit. Now, the edge of a field in a forest is also a really good spot. There's usually a lot more activity in that area as well, because along the forest edge, there's a lot more sunlight that hits the ground, which means it's a lot more shrubby, it's a lot more dense vegetation, which means it's also a good spot for different species to forage. There's a lot more rodent activity, which means there could be fox, there could be coyote, and there's also deer activity as well, because they forage on the good vegetation that grows along the edge there. So I'm set up. I've got my left window here pretty much has a view going all the way along the edge of the field. My front window is kind of looking out into the field. I've got a whole bunch of blooming mullein, some yarrow, as well as some different shrubs and different kinds of vegetation that birds can perch on. And then to my right, I also have a large expanse of field. I've actually got a white pine that's probably just right about where my minimum focusing distance is, so if something perches on that, I should be able to get it. And there's also edge of the field that goes along that way too. So if anything goes walking along the edge, I should see it. And if any birds are around perching, I should see it as well. Right now, I've got some indigo bunting that's singing to my right. There's all sorts of swallows and chimney swifts that are foraging up above me in the field, and I've also heard field sparrows as well. So I'm just gonna sit and wait. I'm hoping that with the rain dying down for the moment, that things might come out and start foraging. But now it's just a waiting game to see what's gonna happen. I've got a deer coming up to my right. Okay, there was a deer that was coming out of the edge of the forest. And it crept out, and then I don't think it liked that the blind was here, because it realized that it wasn't usually a normal part of the atmosphere or the environment, so it ended up snorting and then running back. But I'm hoping that if I sit here quietly, it's going to get used to it and possibly come back out. A lot of times deer will get spooked, run, and then actually come back. It's kind of their way of testing to see if something's actually going to go after them or not. So I'm just going to sit here quietly and hope that the deer comes back. Okay, this is really great. The one deer that I saw along the edge of the forest over that way, there's actually 3 of them, and it looks like they've looped farther down the field, and they're actually out into the field now. Okay, now there's 4 deer. So they're out foraging in the field, and they're actually foraging right next to at least 2 turkeys as well. So they're all kind of in the same area foraging, and it looks like they're slowly making their way towards me. It's kind of hard to tell yet because they're just kind of sitting in one spot foraging, but there's one that's kind of coming this direction, and the 2 are facing this direction. So I'm hoping that means that they'll come a little bit farther this direction. They're probably about 100 yards away right now. So, but this is great. There's actually activity. So just need to sit, be patient, and hope that they come this direction. Now that the wildlife is far enough away from me now, I figured I'd talk to you a little bit about the benefits of using a photo blind and some tips and tricks on how, where, and when to set a photo blind up. So here we go. So a photo blind can be really useful for trying to photograph and get close to wildlife that is very skittish. So in most cases, assuming you set it up in the right location, setting up and sitting in a photo blind allows the wildlife to come to you. It allows them to get used to your presence without being scared off by your silhouette. And it's very useful in photographing wading birds, ducks, kingfishers, and a lot of different mammals because they're a lot more skittish and a lot more aware of your presence. And also photo blinds allow you to sit and observe wildlife and allow the wildlife to be calm and kind of go about their normal business without being scared of your presence or even aware of your presence. So that's one of the great things about using a photo blind. But all of that really comes down to being able to find a good spot to set up a photo blind and knowing where and when to set up the photo blind. So there's really kind of two options that you can use to use a photo blind. So you can either kind of do it habitat specific, or you can try to photograph a specific species. So today I just did habitat specific, so I came out to this open field along the edge of the forest, and I just wanted to set up and see if there's any birds or mammals that were out and about in this specific habitat. Another option that you can do is if you want to do a specific species that you want to photograph. Now that one can kind of come with a little bit more research and a little bit more preparation, because oftentimes when you want to be specific species you want to photograph, you're going to need to set up some trail cameras in advance. You're going to need to do some scouting, some research. You're going to have to figure out where that species goes, how it interacts with the habitat, and kind of figure out where the best spot to set up the photo blind so that you can capture some of that behavior of the animal as it's moving through a specific location. So that's kind of the two ways you can set up a photo blind. I have to be quiet now because a deer is walking right towards me. was amazing. The two does came over and just came directly towards me. One was probably about 15 yards away. It was so close. I actually had to take off my 600mm and just put on my 24-105, and I just used the 100mm to get some pictures and video. It's like absolutely amazing. It's the kind of thing that you wouldn't be able to really do unless you had some sort of blind or really good concealment. The only problem with the whole situation was that it's getting really breezy and the breeze was blowing directly towards them, so they could definitely smell me. So they weren't as calm as I was hoping that they were going to be, but it was still amazing. They walked right over to me. Even though they could smell me, they knew that I was around, but they couldn't figure out where I was because I'm in the blind. And even though they smelled me, they didn't run, which is pretty much the biggest thing that I really like about this, is because a lot of times even if deer just catch a whiff of you and they can see you a little bit, they're just going to take off and run. But because I'm in the blind, concealed, they couldn't figure out where I was. They just stayed in the area and let me get some amazing pictures and video of them. Oh, I couldn't have made this work better today. This was perfect. Now that the deer have gone back into the forest more, it's just a matter of sitting and being patient again. It's the hardest part about sitting blind is you're not able to go after and kind of follow wildlife. You just have to sit, wait, and wait for things to come towards you. Some of you watching might be interested in actually getting a blind for yourself, a pop-up blind like this one. If you do, I really suggest it. I use the Tragopan V6 blind for myself. It's room enough for one. You've got 4 different windows you can shoot out of, and it's got great variety. It's got good window inserts that you can help aid in the camouflage of yourself. And it's, as you can see, it's really easy to set up. It takes maybe about 2 minutes to set up. There's also different attachments that you can do, so you can actually have I forget what it's called. It's an attachment that goes onto the door, so you actually have a solid floor, and it also has a kind of an awning that attaches to it so that you can have a little bit more space, a little bit more room inside. Also, some of you might be wondering, well, is it really that easy just to set up a blind and things will just come towards you like they did today? And the answer to that is definitely not. There's a lot of research that goes into trying to find a spot to set up a blind. So for today, I have come to this location a couple of times. I actually set up the blind 2 other times here, and I didn't have nearly as much success as I did today. So I know that this area, I kind of hinted to this earlier, but I know this area is used by deer and other mammals because there's tracks that come across the field, and there's also a pretty substantial rutted path, game path, that is along the edge of the forest where it meets the field. So that's usually a pretty good spot where animals will traverse a path through that way, because it's easier to walk in the field than it is in the forest, but they're still close enough to the forest that if they need to run to escape a predator, they can easily jump into the forest and escape that way. So that's kind of how I knew this was going to be a good spot eventually to set up. So what you can do is do some research, so you can get a better understanding of how animals behave and where they interact and how they interact with their habitat. You can find game trails and kind of set up some trail cameras to see when and how they move through that area. So just because you find a game trail doesn't mean that it's used all the time. So you kind of have to do some research and kind of pick and choose, and a lot of it is kind of trial and error. So you can set up the pop-up blind near a game trail, and you can sit and wait and see if things come out and about. And really, sooner or later, you will have success. A lot of it is sometimes just luck, but there's also a lot of back-end research that goes into it as well. And there's actually another deer that is out in the edge of the forest over that way in the field, about 75 yards away. Actually, I wonder if that's a mom with a fawn. It is. There's a mom with two fawns about 75 yards in front of me. And they're walking this direction, but they're staying on the far side close to the forest. So it would be really awesome if they came a little bit closer. Let's see if we can get some footage of them though, even though they're so far away. It's another thing you can consider too is, so there's a lot of activity today, right now, because we had some really heavy rain the past 2 days. So a lot of wildlife was probably hunkered down during that rain, and now that it's actually stopped raining, the weather's nice, it's cool, they're actually out feeding now, even though it's the middle of the day. Right now it's 12:30. You'd think that a lot of animals would not be active during this time, but because they probably didn't forage that much overnight, they're out and about now, getting some food and being active. So that's another thing to consider as well. The mom and the two fawns are staying pretty far. They're staying along the edge of the far side of the forest in the field. But they are kind of slowly coming this direction a little bit, so just have to sit and wait and hope that they come a little bit farther. They're definitely still foraging, so. Well, the two fawns that I had seen are still out in the field in front of me somewhere, I believe. I think the mom went over to the tree line and actually went into the forest, and it looks like the two fawns are probably bedded down somewhere in the field. So I'm just sitting and waiting and hoping that the mom will come back eventually to collect them, and then maybe they'll come over in this direction. Once again, patience is the name of the game. Just sitting and waiting and being quiet and hoping that there'll be more activity coming this way. Well, that's going to be it for me today. The two fawns are still out in the field, I believe. They're probably just napping. There hasn't been any activity in about 2 hours now, so I'm going to wrap this video up. I hope you enjoyed the tips and tricks that I share with you with using a photo blind, and I hope that you can actually incorporate some of these tricks and tips into your own photography. And if you have any tips of your own or any experiences with using a photo blind, leave them in the comments below. And as always, if you found this video entertaining, helpful, or fun to watch, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.